Ladies and gentlemen,
Live from the van down by the river.
Starring Mike Murray
and
Nicole Rovine.
This
is
SNL.
SNL By The Numbers.
Numbers.
Hello, SNL Universe. Welcome to 2023 of the Saturday Night Network. This is our first live show of this year and our fourth year that we've existed in. 2020, 21, 22, and now 23. I am joined always by Jon and Nicole and talk to them about a lot of stuff, but we gave you 128 podcasts last year. That's more than 10 a month. So if you didn't listen to all of them, you should. But if you don't feel like you have 128 podcasts worth of time, I suggest you go check out the highlight reel that Jon Schneider put together, the best of the network that we did this previous year. So check it out, and we have a little taste of everything. So first of all, I need to introduce Nicole Rovine. Happy New Year. Great to see you. How you been?
Happy New Year. I am really good. I'm happy to be here. I am thinking about that Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where they figure out how long can you continue to say Happy New Year, and he decided January 7th. And we're past that, but I think in the context of this universe, I feel that it's rather appropriate to say it because we haven't all seen each other. It's a new year. It's a new By the Numbers, same thing, but new year. So I find it appropriate. But I do love the obsessive overanalyzing of when is the exact right day to stop saying Happy New Year.
Yeah, I once got Happy New Year in March.
Are you serious? Gosh. You're kidding.
No, I'm just quoting Seinfeld.
Oh, yeah. Missed that one.
You brought up Curb.
I feel
Jon,
silly for missing that.
We haven't talked to you on the By the Numbers show since the last By the Numbers show, which was the Austin Butler Cecily finale. So how was your Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year, everything since we last saw you?
Well, Happy New Year, Mike. Happy New Year, Nicole. Yeah, I feel like every year it is a tradition that our first show of the year, we have this debate as well. So I think that happens if you go back to our first show last year, trying to figure it out. But never too late to say Happy New Year to our friends here on the SNN. And yeah, I mean, Nicole said it. It's the first time we're all seeing each other, but I feel like I just saw all of you when I was doing that best of last week. Not literally, but just putting together so many funny highlights from the year. And I feel just the pressure's amped up to see what we're going to produce in 2023. But life has been good. It's been a while since we've been live. I mostly had a staycation, or at least I tried to not do too much work, but I'm a little bit of a workaholic sometimes where if I really love something, I have to keep working at it. But I had some fun times with family, saw some friends, watched some good football. And now I'm just really excited with the announcement. It was last week already, where Aubrey Plaza and Michael B. Jordan are hosting Saturday Night Live coming up in just a couple of weeks. So that will be they're not hosting together. It's not a Marty Steve situation, but back-to-back weeks. And then we'll get a third one after that. So I'm already, I'm feeling amped up. I'm feeling excited. And if you're wondering like, hey, what's the difference between this show and the last By the Numbers that we watched, you guys, like now we have some idea of what 2023 SNL is going to look like. So I feel like we're able to prognosticate just a little bit with the show tonight.
Absolutely. And this show is also for people who may not have caught all the shows last year because we're releasing the data. It's going to be all out there. We'll put it on socials. Usually wait till the end of the year and make a big splash, but we're going to put it out there, have all the appearances and all the screen time. So we're going to show them in the podcast and put them up online. So if you're curious, and this is a good show to listen to just because we're going to go through the cast and what's happened in 9 episodes. So, and in this season alone, we've had 9 hours, 29 minutes, and 19 seconds of SNL to analyze. Went through all of them, 444 cast appearances. That totaled 11 hours, 5 minutes, and 1 second. So it's all going to be here in this list. So Nicole, will you introduce what we're going to talk about first?
Nicole, hold on. We just got you muted. So let's just...
Thank you. So as Mike mentioned, we are going to dive into, the big picture this episode. That's what this is for. We're going to start with appearance stats. So If you've been watching, following along, we talk about appearances, we talk about screen time, we talk about different metrics and then the intersection of those metrics. So this one is pure appearances. How many times, quantity, number of times do you see certain cast members appear? So I'm going to read them out for our audio listeners. If you're on YouTube, you can see it. If you are on audio, just as valid as anyone else, I will read them for you. Okay, so this is, again, SNL season 48, episodes 1 through 9, the first leg, the fall, the calendar year 2022 of season 48. So Heidi Gardner, 38, Chloe Fineman, 37, Kenan Thompson, 36, Ego Wodum, 33, Bowen Yang, 33, Mikey Day, 32, Cecily Strong, 31, Sarah Sherman, 30, James Austin Johnson, 29, Michael Longfellow, 25, Devin Walker, 24, Marcelo Hernandez, 22, Punky Johnson, 22, Andrew Dismukes, 19, Molly Carney, 13, Michael Che, 10, and Colin Jost, 10. So, Mike, anything you want to point out here?
Yeah, I'm going to toss this one to Jon, actually, because this is a stat near and dear to his heart, is what he considers to be just like the stat to point to, because it's really not subjective. It's like, were you on the show or were you not on the show? And he spent a lot of time going back to all the old seasons. And so now we have a pretty good data set. We have 9 episodes. It's not quite half the season, but we're at the mid-season point. So we're going to talk about everyone in the cast tonight. So we don't want to get too specific, but I do want to have Jon maybe revisit the September Jon and say, what would he say if he saw this list right now? Would anything be like, wow, I did not see that coming?
That's an interesting way to look at it. I think, obviously Heidi being at the top and then Chloe second, so 38 and 37, right about Kenan 36, is interesting. A lot of women in the cast have departed in 2022, so you would think there would be some risers. It's not that unexpected that Heidi is at the top, but just when you see it visually, it really feels like a changing of the guard. So to have Heidi and Chloe, Ego at 4th, Bowen at 5, I mean, these are people who, maybe were inching their way up. I mean, Chloe to me is like a massive surprise at 2, but, them inching their way up, and now that they're there, that's really interesting to me. Obviously, if I had to guess, and again, you can go back to a lot of the takes about the specific cast appearances. If you go back to our cast draft that we did in the preseason, that's one where we sort of went through each cast member and drafted based on those expectations. And we did have a lot of fun discussions about that on our recent draft podcast that we did over the holidays. But I will say the standouts here from a negative perspective are probably Punky and Andrew, our third-year players, who collectively have 5 featured players ahead of them as far as appearances are concerned. Actually, I guess Marcelo's tied with Punky, so just a little bit of a caveat there. But Sarah, JJ, Longfellow, Devin, Marcelo, all equal with or above Punky. Andrew there at 19. Molly at 13, obviously expected more from them so far, but it's a very interesting brief glimpse into what we're going to be talking about later, which is a detailed play-by-play of each cast member through the first half of the season and talking about our expectations for the second half.
Absolutely. And that was my headline looking at this, Jon, was literally what you just said, was that we have 2 third-year players that, they came in a group of 3, and these are the 2 left. And then you have 2 from last year that came in with a group of 3, and they are left, which is Sarah Sherman and James Austin Johnson. So just right there alone, the fact that 2 second-year players are ahead of 2 third-year players is interesting. But then to have 2 of the rookies be ahead of them as well, and like you mentioned, Marcelo tied with Punky, who is ahead of Andrew. So I want to throw it to Nicole and just say, when you look at this, does anything make you happy with what you see here, or is you think it makes sense for the eyeball test of watching these 9 shows?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting phrase to bring up, is the eyeball test, because we're talking about what we've seen objectively this fall, and then we're talking also about these longer term, wider conversations that we've all had over the last several years at this point, and so like the Chloe storyline is really jumping out at me, because it feels like just a few months ago, 7 months ago, we were talking about how she would look so different on a chart like this, that she would be
in these isolated, very Chloe branded pre-tapes and have like a starring role, and then you don't see her, incorporated into other, sketches throughout the show, and you see like Chloe showcases that feel custom tailor-made for her, and then you don't see her around. And so I'm like, my eyeball test is almost failing me to think that it's like the opposite is true now, that she is in so many sketches across the episode, different types of sketches, sketches written by several different writers, collaborating with different people. So she is a lot more like really present at the show. And I mean, you see this top three, Heidi, Chloe, and Kenan. We've talked about Heidi and Kenan in very similar ways the last couple years, in these like really utility players, reliable people who are, can anchor down a sketch, can turn a sketch around, make it better, can fit in anywhere. And I mean, you see those top three, each one behind the other. It's 36, 37, 38, that top three. So, maybe it's time in 2023 that we kind of talk about Chloe in that way with the Heidi and the Kenan conversation, which I would never have thought of, again, like 7-8 months ago. I would have said she's, more of like a star. If she's on screen, she's being the star of the show, which I would say Sarah is like that to me, who I always, have nothing but amazing things to say about Sarah. I think she's having the best season of any cast member in many ways. But it does feel like when you see Sarah, she's having a star turn. Everything you see from her is her being a star, which I love. And that's how Chloe used to be. And now it's like, oh, Chloe's just like showing up in a lot of places. And, she's not the star every time, but she's also making the people around her look good all the time, oftentimes. So, what do you guys think of that notion of like the Heidi Kenan conversation also being like a Chloe conversation?
I think you raised a good point, Nicole. I was hoping to mention tonight, which was that I feel that she's very much on an island, even now. So the fact that you mentioned that's kind of what you're seeing, makes me feel even more confident with that take. But 37 appearances, I mean, and they're all over the place as far as the duration of them. She had 21 last year at this point, which would put her below Punky, and between Punky and Andrew now would be Chloe as of last season and her third season. So I think it makes sense, like what Jon said, his opening take, that there's a vacuum there for the women of the cast. So Heidi and Chloe, I think, is what you'd want to see up there with Ego as the top three women, and now they're the most tenured women of the cast with Cecily leaving. So I think that makes sense. But as far as that, I mean, Jon, closing take before we look at screen time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good transition point to sort of get to screen time, which is that I really value cast appearances as a stat just because they're the easiest thing for the casual viewer to look at. It's like, how many times do you literally appear on screen? And overall, that's sort of how people start to get to know you, how many appearances you make. But there is advanced analytics, and that's what this show By the Numbers was designed for, because you'll see on the next chart, which we'll get to in a minute, but Chloe Fineman isn't in second place on the second one because her screen time is lower than second, even though she's second in appearances, right? So it's the actual, physical time that she's on screen versus how many appearances she makes in a sketch. That's where context starts to matter when you start to talk about these players. So I do value that Chloe has been in the second most sketches so far this season. But when we start talking about screen time, which we'll get into in a moment, we'll see, is that really the be all end all for her as far as fitting in with somebody like Heidi and Kenan, or can she replace a Cecily? Like, I don't know about that. So I think it's just part of the larger conversation that we'll get into.
Yeah, and to transition, bring up the next chart for screen time, just to keep going with Chloe's. She would be 13th in the cast in screen time per appearance. So obviously, you take that big number of appearances and a smaller number of screen time, which is not really a small number, but that's a lot of appearances for Chloe. So that makes sense. So she's at 1 minute 6 seconds per appearance if you average it out, which puts her only ahead of Punky, Longfellow, Devin Walker, and Marcelo Hernandez. So she's like literally bottom of the pack for her class, and for the repertory players would be her and Punky at the bottom. So definitely these two stats intersecting. Chloe is a perfect person to point out in that regard. Nicole, you want to show us what we have here?
I would love to. All right. So this is season 48, episodes 1 through 9, screen time. So the total number of minutes and seconds that these cast members have appeared on screen rather than what we just looked at, which was pure quantity number of times we see them. This is number of minutes total across all of those times. Okay, so in first place, Cecily Strong with 64 minutes and 30 seconds. Then Kenan Thompson, 58 minutes, 54 seconds. Colin Jost, 55 minutes, 23 seconds. Heidi Gardner, 55 minutes, 16 seconds. Ego Wodum, 55 minutes, 14 seconds. Bowen Yang, 54 minutes, 55 seconds. Mikey Day, 53 minutes, 43 seconds. Chloe Fineman, 40 minutes, 42 seconds. Sarah Sherman, 36 minutes, 48 seconds. James Austin Johnson, 35 minutes, 41 seconds. Michael Che, 32 minutes, 55 seconds. Andrew Dismukes, 31 minutes, 26 seconds. Michael Longfellow, 21 minutes, 46 seconds. Punky Johnson, 19 minutes, 28 seconds. Devin Walker, 17 minutes, 46 seconds. Molly Carney, 15 minutes, 21 seconds. And Marcelo Hernandez, 15 minutes, 13 seconds. So, Mike, anything you want to point out here?
Have to point out the obvious. Cecily missed the first 3 episodes,
Yeah.
but here she is on top, which I figured she would be in the top 3 or 4, but to pass Kenan and be number 1 in the cast. So it's, basically like running a marathon, and like I'll spot you 3 miles and I'll see you at the finish line. So that's what Cecily just did here. And you'll see if you watch along with us, they are color coded by episode. So you see the impact that we had that final 3 set of Keke Palmer, Stephen Marty, and Austin Butler, that she ran away with it. So it makes sense that, we really had a lot of Cecily time in her final 3 episodes that we might have not have known going in, and then just more and more. So it makes sense that she's at the top, but not only on top, but she's 6 minutes ahead of Kenan. So it's a pretty big lead to be on top. If you look, you see, as Nicole read out, Colin, Heidi, Ego, and Bowen are all separated by a minute. So really neck and neck. And then Cecily, like I said, 6 minutes ahead of Kenan. So that's what stands out to me. We see Heidi up there and Kenan because they do appear a lot. So that brings them up. But John, when you see this and you see Andrew and Punky down low, and like I mentioned, Heidi and Kenan, but is there anyone that you think, kind of like we talked about with Chloe, that you think would be an interesting discussion between the intersection of appearances and screen time?
Well, I think when it comes to the rookies, I think you could certainly see that, especially for Devin, Longfellow, and Marcelo, that they are lower on the screen time chart versus the appearance chart. So when they are appearing on screen, it is for a little bit of time, which is fine. That's totally typical of what you would get from rookies. So that sort of makes sense to me. I think what I've, and we could discuss this maybe more when we get to him, when we talk about each individual cast member. But I do think that one of the interesting narratives, in case you missed the individual episodes of our By the Numbers show this season, is the discussion that Mike has had with several of our panelists about this very weird trend of Cecily Strong taking screen time away from Andrew Dismukes, who basically have the complete, they could not be more different, could not have more different comedic personas. But what seemed to have happened this season is Cecily came back, and the numbers don't lie, Andrew went away. And I don't think it's fully a coincidence. I think that it's possible that Andrew's style of comedy, the sketches he was writing, ended up being low on the totem pole compared to hey, we got to get a Cecily in here, or we got to get a Cecily style sketch in here. And the Andrew Dismukes style sketch, or, the Will Forte style sketch, which we do believe Andrew is sort of in that vein, ends up being less important when you have a tenured cast member who ends up being there to dominate. So that's what I find very interesting when you start to look at the colors of each individual episode. It just seems like she sort of pushed him out, because I think the narrative that you have been discussing, Mike, is right.
And just for some context right there, Cecily, puts up zeros in the first 3 episodes, and Andrew's best 2 episodes, screen time wise, was the first 2. So he did put up 7 minutes, 17 seconds in the premiere, the Miles Teller episode, and then 6:15 in the Brendan Gleeson episode. So, 2 very different hosts, very different vibe episodes, but yet Andrew Dismukes found a way to be in the show a lot those weeks. And that was, everyone was in the cast except Cecily for those shows. So definitely a discussion that I did not think we would be having, but it's come up enough because it is a little strange. So, Nicole, when you see screen time up and down, you know how this goes. We follow it so closely, and now we have 9 episodes. And again, it's just I'm seeing Sarah and JJ like pretty neck and neck. That JJ was a lot higher than her last year. I know you love to talk about Sarah, so look where she is now. She's ahead of JJ. So any comment on Sarah Sherman edging ahead of JJ in the screen time race?
Yeah, I mean that's a case where it's the eyeball test, it's the discourse test, which I just made up, but what the way that we talk about things and the way that we're seeing things and all of that. I mean, I feel like it's really Sarah's season. Like she is having an amazing season, and then JJ it's not his fault through no fault of his own, but I think that there's just a fatigue of in not just for SNL, but just like in general with politics right now and with like the types of characters that he's really good at impersonating. And I would also say that's true of Cecily. Like she brings just such a fresh light to a lot of these like conservative, women in politics. But even so, I think it kind of is, I think she's leaving at a good time because I know personally, I feel like, and I've never been one to say SNL is too political or the political cold opens are too much. I enjoy them, but I think there is just in the general climate, just a fatigue of it right now. Because when JJ first got on, it was like, all right, we have to write Trump into everything. This is just too good not to do that. And I think that was the thing. His first season was just get the Trump stuff in there because this guy is just way too good not to. And then, his Biden is great, but it's not as fun as his Trump. Hate to say it, but it's true. So, yeah, I think there's been less room for him to try new things because when you go on as we've said, you cannot have a better first episode than he did. We've talked about a few historical examples, but really in this day and age, you cannot have a better first episode than he did. And I think like he's gonna have an amazing career, but I think that like if he plateaus for the rest of his SNL career, that's an amazing SNL career is what I would say. Whereas Sarah is more like the sky's the limit with what she brings to the show, and it's more my speed. I love to see what she's doing. So I also like that they're very similar to each other in the numbers because they're so different. And, when we had Aristotle in this conversation, we talked a lot about how he was very talented and had a lot of potential, but he didn't quite have the exact place. We couldn't like fit him into like the Jenga of SNL. We none of us could be like, I think he really makes sense in this part of the show with this dynamic of it wasn't about talent or skill. It was like a Jenga, it was a puzzle. And I think with Sarah and JJ, it's like that perfect puzzle with both of them. They fit into such different parts of the puzzle, but really well. And so, an amazing,
Agreed.
class that they're in.
I'm glad you brought up Aristotle, so I don't have to, because his screen
usually
time,
that's your job, but I'll take it this time.
What year is this that we're talking about Aristotle?
I think it's interesting to bring him up in unfortunately in historical context. Sorry to him, but I think it is kind of interesting.
I like bringing up Aristotle so he's not forgotten. I think that's why I like to bring him up. But he had 15 minutes, 38 seconds in his SNL career. And Michael Longfellow has 21:46 right now. Devin 17:46, Molly 15:21, and Marcelo 15:13. So we brought in 4 rookies this year, and almost all of them have eclipsed Aristotle's career screen time on the show. So if you're thinking that any of these rookies are, a little falling behind and you're worried about them, that's a stat that I would say, hey, I mean, it can get worse than this, and they're actually doing pretty well. John, you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, not so much on the Aristotle stuff, but more just like a couple other things about the chart before we move on. which is, I would say that except for the rookies like Longfellow, Devin, and Marcelo, who clearly are having a very, small amount of screen time per appearance, Chloe is the one that we were talking about earlier. So just looking at this chart, Chloe is 8th on this chart in terms of screen time, but 2nd in terms of appearances, being the one that sort of, has a big drop off between Mikey at 53 minutes and Chloe at 40 minutes here. So just something interesting to look at when it comes to perspective. And I think that the standard deviation here between Kenan, Colin, Heidi, Ego, Bowen, Mikey is very interesting, how they're all very stacked up and even. That's probably a good sign for what we're getting from most of the cast. But what's most interesting for me here, of course, is the departure of Cecily, which is, it sort of reminds me, Nicole, a little bit of on a reality TV show when you're sort of watching it and, somebody gets eliminated and you're sort of waiting for all the people that you don't get to see enough, but it's like, okay, now there's less people on the show. We're going to get more time with them. Like, we're down to 16 players now, 14 if you remove Jay and Colin. So I really feel like this is the most opportunity we've seen for people in a while. And that's what gets me excited for what we're going to get moving forward.
Yeah, let's lean into that a little. I mean, we talk, we imply all the time that we see SNL through the lens of a reality show or a competition show. But I love the way that you just said that. And it's so true. I watched the season premiere of RuPaul's Drag Race on Friday, and the first person who got out made such a splash and such an impression. And, there is, with SNL is different from reality shows in the sense that reality shows can be produced, after they're filmed, like producers will tell certain narratives based on facts that they know that viewers don't know as they're watching. So, if someone is going to be eliminated, you're going to want to give them screen time in the edit before they go so that person...
Which is Cecily, by the way, for the last 3 episodes, who was going to get eliminated. And then she has 3 big fat blurbs the last 3 weeks.
Right.
So who is the villain of this cast? That's what I want to know.
Who's getting villain screen time?
Yeah, the villain edit. I'm just kidding, but
that's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, let's dive deeper. We'll all think on it and maybe report back as we analyze, to ourselves. But thinking about, that's like a step further from what we've done before of comparing SNL to reality and competition shows. How can the storylines still have that same like producedness to them, even though they're not being told after the events take place, if that makes sense with reality shows? I'm going to keep thinking on that because there is some sense of of course, the whole show is producing as you go. But then there are cases like Cecily, if it was known that she was going to go, there have been sketches for her for a year and a half now that were kind of hinting that she was leaving, like the Janine Pirro, of course, with the wine. That was like, oh, that's a goodbye sketch. So, this is not the first time we felt like she was leaving. And I'm sure not the first time that writers wrote with the idea of her maybe leaving in mind. But things like that. And I'll always talk about this when anytime someone leaves the show for a few episodes and comes back and then they have amazing screen time, the point is almost mute that, oh, they would have so much more screen time if they were there all the time. Because I think when people are absent and then they appear, they're going to be written in more, they're going to be included more, their sketches are going to go on more, especially if they're a long-standing legacy cast member, who those are the people who are granted that ability to leave more often. It's like something that my mom used to say to me in high school that I didn't understand at the time, but like, it's good to be missed, like if I wanted to go to every party and I felt like I would, I would have FOMO or I wouldn't be cool or whatever. Like, I just felt like I had to show my face all the time. It's like that expression. Like it's good to be missed.
So. I have awful FOMO, by the way.
Yeah, I've gotten way better, but in like high school, it was so bad.
Oh, by the way, you said the point is mute. Is it mute or moot? Mike?
I don't know.
The word moot?
I think it's moot.
Point.
It is moot. Yes.
I think it's a moot point.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't regret the way I said it, but I think you're correct.
Okay. All right, just checking.
We're gonna throw back to,
those are all my takes. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I think I'm a little taked out on that. I sort of rambled, but I don't regret it.
We needed Steve Higgins to say, "We now return to SNL by the numbers." So basically, in general, the whole cast, I mean, excluding the rookies who have no precedent, they weren't in the cast last year. Everyone's numbers are like way up. So other than like Che, who's eerily similar, he had 3240 through the first 9 episodes last year. Remember, he was in the Rudd episode, and he's at 3255 right now. So he's almost exactly same screen time as last year. But
Right, but he's not impacted by cast members leaving, right? Because he has the same segments regardless.
Right. I'm just making a point that everyone in the cast has done better than they were last year. No matter what the cast size, who's there, who's not, just everyone's numbers are way up. So I think that we try to prognosticate or understand maybe what the decisions are behind the scenes about. We noticed that there hasn't been anyone popping up in a monologue this season yet. And that was similar to last year. They were more personal. So when you notice a trend like that, you kind of have to, highlight that because you're pointing towards a visual trend. And that's what we do on By the Numbers show. But that has to be in a meeting. People are saying, we want to do more of that. We want to do less of this. So I think it's also they're being cognizant that people maybe don't like it when people are absent from the show. It can't all be sunshine and rainbows all the time. So it can't be like everyone gets a cookie, as we say on the show a lot. But it's like, I think it doesn't make sense that everyone's in the show more. That makes sense. I mean, we went from 21 cast members to 17. We're about to go to 16, but I don't think that's the only reason that the numbers are up. I think just people are being used more in the show. And I'm noticing that with hosts too. So it has to just be about more appearances on the screen because the show is still 90 minutes. So there's only so much time to be on the show. But it's crazy that everyone is way up. And even if I did take the average of the past 3 seasons rookies, episodes 1 through 9, they'd be at 15 minutes, 19 seconds of screen time. And 3 out of 4 rookies are above that too. So even the 4 rookies are doing well compared to a precedent set by past rookies. But we're going to move on to the entire cast. So we looked at a couple things to just get the temperature check on what's been happening this season. But we want to talk about everyone we talk about all the time and people we don't talk about enough. So that's our way of doing it right here. Normally we talk about the power rankings, which combines the 2 stats we just looked at, appearances, screen time, a lot of factors into a SNL supercomputer produce the stat. So we're going to go from 17 to 1 and talk about each one. We're going to go pretty rapid fire. So Nicole, John, get your hot takes ready. And we're going to talk about each one of them. So while I gather the first one, I was just looking at previous rookies and like Sarah Sherman's like power ranking was lower than these rookies. And now look what's happened to her. So don't take it as a bad thing that the rookies are at the bottom, of course.
Yeah, that's definitely for sure. I think, this is comparing our show in the postseason to the midseason show, things are drastically different. And though this is sort of the unofficial point of the season, I think there's just like the second half of the season is like where stars are made. So I think that there's a lot of potential for us to change the narrative. Like, I think we're going to feel a lot differently about the cast after these next 12 episodes. So.
Absolutely. And we're going to start with one of our rookies, number 17, Molly Kearney. And they have 13 appearances, which ranks 15th in the cast. So behind everyone besides Jost and Che. 15 minutes, 21 seconds of screen time, as we saw, which ranks 16th. They've had 2 leads, one in the new cast advice pre-tape in the Gleason episode, way back episode 2. And one, which I loved, was the Please Don't Destroy election night 10-1 pre-tape in the Chappelle episode. 29% of their screen time has been in pre-tapes, which is highest of the cast. Chloe is highest pre-tape screen time with 12 appearances, but most of Molly's screen time has been in pre-tapes compared to other casts. And they are the only cast member, aside from Punky, who has not appeared on Update. So I'm going to start with Nicole. Give me your take on Molly and, what advice would you give them to get them from 17 up to, say, 14 by end of the season?
Yeah. Well, my initial take, as you say all of that, is someone can be at the, towards the bottom, at the bottom of a cast, but if it's a cast in a year like this year, it doesn't feel like a bad thing. I would say, again, I don't mean to hate on Aristotle at all, but I think there is a sense of, if you go back this time last year, or a month from now, this time last year, there was a sense of it did feel like there were opportunities that Aristotle could have, had more opportunities or could have done more. And I'm looking at Molly's numbers and I'm thinking about their best moments on the show and moments where I was really just found them funny, found them memorable, found them an important part of a moment. And I'm like, it's a really good year for a really dynamic cast. And I think my main takeaway is this feels like a really, I don't want to say standard or basic or traditional, but that's kind of the words that are coming to mind as far as a standard rookie season where you have some episodes where you don't really get a lot in, and you have these star moments that are amazing, and then the next episode it's okay, well, what happened to that? Whereas then you have these veterans where you can have star turns every episode. With typical rookies, this is how we were talking about Sarah last year. She was had an amazing episode, and then it took 3 more episodes for her to do something that we were talking about. And I think in a year like this, I feel good about Molly. I think they have a lot more to give. I think it's a typical rookie year, and there's nothing wrong, I think, with typical, in a cast like this.
Right. I feel like I'm on the Dana Carvey McLaughlin group. I should just be like, Jon, Nicole. So, Jon, what have you seen from Molly that you do like and want to see more of? Because you could say that about any rookie, any season, they always have more to give than we've seen. And so has Molly done something that you're like, yeah, more of that in the show, please? No one else is doing that. Or what I've seen has just been right for the show that we could use, say, double the amount in season B of 48.
I mean, can I say none of the above? Because I don't really, let's just be real. Okay. I don't think that Molly's had a good first half of the season. It's been okay. They've had some moments. I think if we could all just let's just be real. Let's all we're all friends here. All the listeners, all the podcasters. I think we had higher expectations for Molly so far in season 48. Yes, the other rookies have been good. Yes, Molly has had some moments. I haven't seen anything that's blown me away. I think there have been elements that have been there. There have been some I think about the new cast advice pre-tape that I think was in the Gleason episode. That was a really great sketch for Molly. I think they've had a few really good one-liners, but mostly I'm seeing, at least in the fan community, a lot of Melissa McCarthy comparisons, which I don't know if that's completely fair. But, that's what people are saying, at least. I don't know if I fully feel that way, because I think it's possible that Molly has completely different range than Melissa. But the problem is we just haven't seen enough to know yet. So I think, I want to be fair to them, because I don't think that this is Molly's fault necessarily. But I'm not convinced yet that SNL knows what to do with Molly thus far. So convince me otherwise over the next 12 episodes, which could completely happen. This is what I'm talking about. We're talking about in 5 months from now, we may be having a completely different conversation about Molly. But let's not beat around the bush and pretend that they've had a good first half of the season, because I don't think Molly has.
Right, absolutely. And we don't pretend to on the show. It's a number show for a reason. They're number 17 because of the stats, not because of our opinions of them. And I think just seeing the last 2 episodes, power ranking score of 8.9 and 5.7 is basically that's a Steve Higgins score, and he doesn't even show his face in the show. But I think just one more thing that's been brought up as we wheeled out the rookies one by one on update, the fact that they haven't been on update, I think is kind of a red flag. So I'm almost certain that it will happen in this second half of the season, but you just have to imagine that the table reads and the pitch meetings and talking with writers that they've been trying to be on update, because we've had Longfellow twice and Marcello twice, Devin once and Molly none. So just think that that's something that if they come from a stand-up background, which we know they do, you got to get an update and either give your fans something to root for or give any doubters some reason to be excited about you. So
Can I just say
I'm
one
going to
more
pull
thing?
up the
Because
next cast member, but John,
Yeah.
please
yeah,
vamp.
go for it. Because like I just want to say this because it's important. Like I am rooting for you, Molly. Like I really have high expectations for Molly, and I'm holding Molly to a high standard. So when it comes to our discussion of them, I've had a very difficult time this season trying to figure out what to say because there just hasn't been enough there. All it is like, oh, that's good. I mean, at least, again, not to have an Aristotle discussion, but at least last year, there were moments in the first half of the season with Aristotle where it was like, okay, that sketch, that was really good. Like, are we going to see that again? Like when we're talking about characters or specific sketch moments, there just hasn't been enough yet. So give me more time.
Absolutely, and there will be more time and more space in the cast. We're going to move on to number 16 in the cast power rankings. Fellow rookie Marcelo Hernandez, who, as I mentioned, has already been an update twice, which is very impressive, and it would probably be talked about more if Michael Longfellow had already not accomplished the same feat in the same amount of time. He's had only those 2 leads, though. He's last in screen time, as we saw, tied with Punky for 12th place with 22 appearances, which 22, not bad for a rookie, but, that's what we're talking about. It's low screen time per appearance. And 42 seconds per appearance, which is last in the cast. 1/3 of his time has been in live sketches, so he's kind of being sprinkled everywhere a little bit. And his, I think about for Marcelo so far, I think about like him being the DJ and the Jack Harlow bartenders sketch is kind of a perfect way to display what Marcelo has been. He's like young, energetic, and kind of gets a couple seconds of screen time, and that's it. 81.8% of his screen time has been during prime time, which is a cast high. So he's being seen early in the night, but just briefly. And his best episode statistically was, of course, the Gleason episode where he did his first update spot. So, John, I'm going to start with you on Marcelo and just give me some more scorching hot takes.
Well, I want to be fair to Marcelo as well because, Jen, and I clarify this for our audience, which is that we're only talking about what happens between the hours of 11:30 and 1 a.m. on screen on a Saturday night. So many of you may have seen the cut sketch, the science fusion sketch that happened during the Butler episode. That was a Marcelo starring piece that never aired. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, he did have a starring role, but not on screen at least. So, it's great that we got to see him and what he could do. I mean, that was fun, but that wasn't on the show. So when it comes to what we've seen on the show so far this season, I've enjoyed Marcelo. I like him. I still want to see, like, is he going to continue to be like in the little brother or the boy role or the DJ? Like, is he going to be sort of like our representation of like TikTokers and a younger generation? And is he going to be put in that box consistently because he is young and he has that place on TikTok? Or are we going to get to see something like a little bit out of character, a little bit more dynamic from him? Like, what is Marcelo's brand on the show? Or is it strictly being like the new young guy? And I think if it is being the new young guy, then it's a dangerous place to be, because if you're in a cast with people who there's a large age discrepancy, there's not always a place in a lot of sketches for the young guy. So I think it's like one of the things I'm going to be watching for with Marcelo in the second half of the season is like, can he put himself in roles that are different than what you would expect from Marcelo?
Feels very safe to me. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I don't want to say that his stand-up comedy that he's on an update is particularly safe, because that I think is refined and strong. But I think Definitely. As far as some of the sketch performances, more in a safe role, which may be what you want from your rookies. Maybe that's the right path. So I'm just, playing both sides here, but it's something I'm going to look forward to see at the end of 48. Are we going to get something atypical for Marcelo?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. I think that bringing Marcelo in does give you some flexibility because of his age. And yeah, I think his voice is great. I think his facial expressions are great. I loved his performance. Just like, because we're talking about little brief appearances in the the Christmas Epiphany one with Dismukes as the son. He was great, and also when he was like the husband on trial and the jurors sketch from Amy Schumer, and he's like, "I'm up for the death penalty." Like, great delivery. Nicole, what do you think about Marcelo? Are you a fan? Do you want to see more of him in the second half, or being at the bottom with all these people like Sarah and Heidi and Kenan? Do you think Marcelo will probably stay down there? What do you think?
Yeah, well, when Jon was talking, I couldn't help but think of Pete Davidson when Jon said, "Is it a great place to be, stuck in that young person thing?" And when you think of Pete Davidson, resident young person for a few years, yeah, he was pigeonholed into that, and I think it limited him in a lot of ways. But then you think of sort of the middle to latter end of his tenure, there were a couple of years there where he was really good and had a lot of like sophisticated sketches and funny, like deep things, or those rap videos that we all loved and talked about so much, that were not just him being pigeonholed as the young person, but him being really creative and, distinctive. And then I would say maybe at the very end, he kind of did a full circle and sort of felt like that resident young person again. But there were a couple years at the like third quarter, if you will, of his SNL tenure where he really grew out of that. And I think, history has shown that being pigeonholed into the young person thing, there's room to grow. I mean, if you're pigeonholed into being like an old fart, where can you go from there unless you're Benjamin Button? So I feel like history has shown that starting out like that is promising.
Jon, any thoughts before we move on?
No, I'm good. I mean, I will. I guess the other thing I would just say is that, coming from a diverse background is extremely important. Like his Hispanic background and playing, those type of roles that we don't typically get on SNL. Like those are things I really enjoy getting to see. So if it's not necessarily diversifying himself in terms of like age in sketches and the type of roles, like I would be fine if he does it from a demographic perspective, or like, whatever element of his background that we don't typically get in our SNL cast members. And there was, he was bringing that to some of his live sketches. I would be cool with that too. So I just would love to see like, what is a Marcelo vehicle look like on a regular basis on the show, which we may get, because I think a lot of people like him, and I do too.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. We're going to talk about a third rookie in a row, Devin Walker. I mean, hey, let's be real. We would be talking about how bad it was if we were seeing vets at 17, 16, 15. So Molly, Marcelo, and Devin makes perfect sense, and probably would be the way you would draw it up if you were to draw it up. So Devin Walker's screen time is 1746. That puts him in 15th place. He's 15th in the power ranking as well. 24 appearances puts him 11th. His only lead has really been the update piece he did, but I did want to highlight some, kind of borderline supporting lead roles, which was he was in the Deer sketch, classroom sketch from Meg Thee Stallion, and then the Heaven Scene sketch from the Chappelle episode. So those were ones where he just had more screen time, wasn't really leading the sketch, but was seen more, and it was in a live capacity. So I always want to see the live chops of these new people, because it's Saturday Night Live, and a lot of people like Beck Bennett, Kyle Mooney bring the Good Neighbor stuff to the show, and then they ended up being unbelievably strong live performers, in my opinion. So I want to see that from these rookies as well. His best appearance was Megan Thee Stallion. He was all over that episode, and then went like completely cold. So other than the ones I just mentioned, we have not seen Devin Walker a lot at all. And I said, I think 2 episodes ago, I'm like, we're definitely on danger watch. I don't think it's bad for the whole season, but when you just completely become a ghost on the show, it is cause for concern, because we've seen that happen before. So Nicole, I'll start with you. We have Devin Walker on the show in his first year with 3 contemporaries with him. Do you think he's in the top 2 or the bottom 2, in your opinion?
Bottom 2. I think out of the 4 rookies, he has probably stood out the least to me, to be honest. I think if I had guessed before looking at all of the data, I would have guessed Molly would have been at the bottom, and then Devin, and then Marcelo, and then Michael. Longfellow, starting from the bottom. But then you think of like the Megan Thee Stallion episode, and you're like, oh yeah, he, that episode alone just like shoots him, a hair past, a little bit past Marcelo. But yeah, I think for me, the single moment where I was like, okay, there's like charisma, there's talent, there's something I want to see more of, was when he was rapping the theme song in the Kenan and Kelly sketch. That was the moment for me where I was like, okay, like this guy really has it and I want to see more of this. But the majority of his appearances, I haven't felt that way. So yeah, I want to like in that moment, I want him to like capture that in a bottle of like that amazing moment where he was rapping that theme song and then doing his Kel impression in general in that sketch, that pre-tape. But yeah, I mean, that I loved so much. I thought comparing Update, we have 3 rookies to talk about and compare for Update. I thought his was the weakest by a wide margin. And I think I'd like to see him maybe do something different on Update. I feel like he could work well with someone else and do something a little bit more outside the box. But yeah, we've been talking again, the second time I'll bring it up, maybe not the last, but these rap videos that without Pete Davidson and Chris Redd, I know I'm missing those. I think that was a really fun part of, for all the musical theater era of the last few years that a lot of people on this podcast talk about that, you didn't like. At the same time of that was also these rap videos, which had a totally different energy. And as someone who loves both of those things, I think after seeing Devin rap in the Kenan and Kelly pre-tape, I think if he kind of spearheads that and brings it back, also Punky, I mean, the SZA song is so viral. Everybody thinks it's a real song on her new album, which I'll talk about when we talk about Punky. But I think that's a huge opportunity for Devin after seeing him in that instant moment. My favorite moment I've seen of him was that. So if he becomes that guy, then this could change for him. He could shoot up the list so fast, and I'd love to see that.
Yeah, and John, I was going to ask you kind of more of a direct question, which is, do you ever feel this way when you see someone in a sketch? Because Devin has been in a decent number of live sketches, talked about Molly, how they've only, they've been in a couple pre-tapes, and maybe a good one we didn't mention was the Scrooge one, the Christmas Carol one, which I thought they were, pretty good in for a short amount of time, which is Devin's been in these live sketches and they almost feel like his character wasn't really needed. And I don't know if you could think of some SNL cast members that like, not necessarily that they were doing anything good or bad, but I'm like, it almost just seemed like there's like a 5th person in the sketch. And that's like Ben Devin for me a lot. That White Elephant sketch with Austin Butler, I remember doing his screen time. And I was like, he's barely talking. And when he said like both lines he said did not get a laugh. When I said he was on like the quote unquote danger watch, it was because he had played a delivery guy in like back-to-back episodes when like he walked on and like handed Cecily wine and like left and like doesn't get a laugh. So these type of utility roles we expect from rookies, but is there something about Devin Walker or is there something about the writing he's received that you've noticed, John?
I just think he's the rawest sketch performer that we have on the cast. Like, I think Molly and Marcelo are probably better sketch performers at this point than Devin is. Maybe not better, but at least their skills are more refined. I find that Devin is just like a really, really raw prospect. Like, if you're going to make a sports comparison, it's like bringing up a rookie and you're not like 100% sure if they're ready yet. But I do think that he has the skills. Like, I've seen, especially in that Kenan and Kelly pre-tape or the online piece that they put of the table read of that sketch, like you can see it. Like, he has it in him. He is extremely likable. Like, I could tell, like, personality wise, love to hang out with him. I feel like he's a fun guy to have as a part of the cast. But I think he's going to be the one that's going to have like the biggest learning curve as far as like finding his place in the cast. And I think he can get there. I just think it's going to take longer than even Molly or Longfellow or Marcelo at this point. And yeah, because of that, and because they want to put him in sketches, we're getting him tacked on to a lot of stuff where he doesn't like, they haven't carved out a like there's no writer sitting there that like, it's like, hey, like, you know what we really need in this sketch? Like, we need a Devin Walker type. You know, they're just like, okay, like, let's get Devin in this.
Yeah, he's definitely a charismatic guy when he's there, and brings presence to the sketches he's in. But I was just like, this kind of just it feels forced, and I feel like SNL normally does a good job with tightening sketches, and they're always editing and rewriting cue cards and stuff. So I was like, is this because of what I mentioned earlier, that we're trying to get everyone in sketches, or is it that maybe his lines didn't work at the dress rehearsal or something like that? Just because it just seemed a little awkward to me at times. But yeah, I mean, let's say it again for Molly, Marcelo, and Devin, who haven't really led any live sketches. I just want to see what that would look like, because we really have no idea until we see it. And I think Devin Walker is probably the biggest question mark for me. Would you agree with that, Nicole?
Yeah, I would agree with that, as far as, yeah, like the biggest sort of, we could see more, and we're, yeah, nothing to add. I agree with you.
John, before we move on.
I mean, I haven't seen any evidence that they don't have faith in him. So as far as a question mark from the producers, like, definitely not. Maybe from the audience, he's maybe the biggest question mark, because like I said, he's just like, if Molly had the same number of appearances as Devin, we would automatically be saying that Molly has had a better season, because Molly seems to be more impactful in the limited time that they've had on the show in terms of those appearances, even though I was making the argument that I'm still not exactly sure they know how to write for them. But when it comes to Devin, I think that his appearances thus far have been probably the least impactful on the cast, which is not a shot at Devin. It's just, this is the type of conversations we have about rookies in their first half of the season.
Definitely. And we're going to go to our first non-rookie tonight, which is I think, semi-polarizing for being extremely likable, as far as polarizing on the show, maybe about whether she's in enough, or, whether she's a good fit on the show. But it's Punky Johnson at number 14, which, friend of the show, and I'm a big Punky fan and talk about her pretty often. It's her third season, came in with Dismukes and Lauren Holt, and there was definitely some times where we were like, who's the one that's falling behind? And then it ended up being Lauren Holt that gets the axe from the show. Punky gets a second chance as a featured player, and then really didn't do much for a sophomore season. And that's kind of a make or break season. So to see her come back for a third season is a huge vote of confidence for her. And we got that. And then right away, we see her in the Charmin Bear sketch in the Miles Teller episode, which is her longest appearance of the season so far, which is not great. But we see her in the classroom sketch with Meg Thee Stallion, and the Girl Talk sketch, and Hot Girl Hospital. So right away in those first three, we're seeing a good amount of Punky, and then it hasn't really gotten much better since then. We had the Big Boys song that Nicole mentioned, which probably is her best appearance of the season. I think we probably all agree with that. But she is 22 appearances, tied with Marcella for 12th, 19 minutes, 28 seconds of screen time, which is 14th in the cast. And yeah, I mean, as we've seen, we haven't seen them yet in our breakdown tonight. There's three, like, quote unquote underclassmen, Sarah, JJ, and Longfellow, that are ahead of her, that are, less experienced in the show. So John, I'll start with you on Punky Johnson's career or season so far. And you think it'll turn around from here, or is she best served to be that type of player that appears in the Big Boys song, makes everyone love her, and then goes back into hibernation a little bit?
I mean, I really hope it does. I don't think the show trusts her as much as they should, because I do think that she's really good when she's given an opportunity. But she just, like, doesn't get the opportunities. And, like, again, like, it's it's really hard for us to parse out, like, what the reason for that is. Like, perhaps the show sees something that we don't, where they realize, okay, maybe she's not, great in a bunch of sketches, and then we just need to put her in roles that work for her. And that's fine if she's going to carve out a spot in the show that's like a Punky spot in the show. whether it's through raps or through I've made the argument many times on the podcast that I think Punky should be playing herself more, because I think she has such a strong personality and such a unique voice to bring to the show. I go back to her flirting with Selena Gomez in that monologue at the end of last season. I think that was a great appearance for her, and exactly like the type of stuff we want to see from Punky. And I think that every now and then Punky pops up with like a really good episode and it's like, damn, why can't we get some more of that? So for me, I just think it's I don't necessarily, I don't think, Punky's doing anything wrong necessarily. I just think that for whatever reason, like I just, they don't seem to feel like she's a natural utility player. And as a result of that, I think that she's, from a numbers perspective, she's really limited, because nobody feels like, or a lot of writers don't seem to feel of like, hey, we're having a scene at a house or a scene at a school or a scene in an office. Let's put Punky in one of the chairs at the table. And I think that really affects her analytics.
I think that's a great point. And just like you just said, probably a lot of the archetypes, I mean, because sketch comedy is based on a lot of the same tropes. That's why we make fun of them, and that's why they're funny, because we're being satirical about things that have happened 10 million times. And Punky might not be the person that you go, oh, let's put Punky in over Ego or Heidi or Chloe. But when Punky shows up, and how many times have we said Punky tonight? It's just fun to say, I think. But I think there were some question marks, and this is coming from a Punky fan, about her acting ability in the first 2 seasons. And this season, I've mentioned a lot on the By the Numbers show, I think her acting has been like stellar, phenomenal this season, just in the lines that she has been given in small and large roles. Because I mentioned it sometimes, the process of doing screen time and like seeing her react or give lines, she's been like really, really good. Her longest appearance of her career in SNL is unfortunately in the Maya Rudolph monologue, where she just stood there. So I'm hoping that she breaks that this season, and it's not because of the Charmin Bears or something like that. That should not be her longest appearance of the year. But Nicole, just when you think about Punky Johnson, is there something that stands out that's not Strolling to the Polls or Big Boys? Because John mentioned the Selena Gomez monologue, and there's been little Punky moments that should give us optimism. But do you see her, maybe not being a numbers darling, but being someone who could have, let's say, a 5-year career in SNL?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to reject your question a little bit, because the point I really want to bring up is we love numbers here, but to me, I think the moment so far of SNL that has transcended the show and reached people who don't watch the show the most, I would say a couple years ago it was Rap Roundtable with Pete and Timothy Chalamet. So far this year, it's Big Boys. Like, that song on TikTok has like 100,000 videos that have used the song, maybe even 200,000. So many. There are people all over Twitter that think it's a real song. Like, there are edits and DJs who are remixing it. John, you look into that. Like, it's like everyone is using that, thinks it's real, is editing it and remixing it. And that's a stat. I mean, we know also that Punky was behind that. She wasn't just in it. She was a big part of the process of creating that and inventing it. So, SNL is only as powerful as when it transcends itself, and when it reaches people who are not sitting here talking about it in this detail to this degree, or people listening to us talk about it to this degree. That's how I feel about the show. And so when you can create, I mean, Punky has essentially created what only Pete Davidson and Timothy Chalamet in tandem created a couple years ago. And I think she deserves more credit for that, because not to just turn this whole conversation into a, like, you have to capture a viral moment. You can't have, the best way to be on the show is not being in a 3-minute and 32-second brilliant sketch. It's being able to capture people in 11 seconds in a TikTok. But I sent John something yesterday of Moses Storm, who is a comedian who we saw in Canada, who we love and is really talented. And he was saying, like, stand-up comedians don't even, write and prepare to wow a crowd. Like, they prepare things for their Instagram reels, or they have, they do crowd work so that they can have Instagram content without ruining the content of their, their performances, so that they don't ruin the content of what they're going to put in their stand-up special. And SNL is the same to me. It's unfortunate, but it's just the way that media in general is right now. It's important to create a beautiful 90-minute show, but that's only as impactful as if you can whip out a couple 17-second segments from that 90 minutes of content that is going to transcend the show, and then in full circle get people to ultimately, latch on to the full 90 minutes, and that sort of cyclical thing. So that's really what I want to say about Punky, is she created that moment, which is important for the show.
Can I just say one more thing about Punky before we head to our next cast member, which is, this whole Big Boys thing really makes me value Punky as a writer, because I think, I am in love with The Lonely Island. Everybody knows that, but it's really easy to write raps or songs or sketches from your own worldview and your own perspective on things. But Punky, even she joked about it in the song, like, she's gay, she likes women, but she's writing about big boys. And I think that the perspective, and this was like funny because I did get to talk to Punky a little bit about her process of creating this. When you are a writer and you're writing from other people's point of views or other perspectives or a worldview that isn't always directly your own, that's not the easiest thing to do. And the fact that Punky can pull that off so well shows her strength as a writer. So the thing is just like, I need the show to just give her a little bit more leash so she can continue to write really good sketches, because I think she has it in her.
Definitely. I mean, I think I'm optimistic about Punky, not in a numbers way. Might be a little bit of a Melissa Villasenor scenario where, unfortunately, you don't see a lot of her, and then when you do, you're happy and you want to see more, and you're disappointed that you don't see her more. But I think that what you said was great, and Nicole said was great, is that these things that transcend the show, or maybe you have to think about it for a minute before you fully appreciate it, are what make Punky valuable to the show. That's basically my last take on her before we move on. Yeah, for sure. But it is interesting to go from, somebody who is not a rookie, right? So now we're talking about, the bottom of the charts with somebody who's in their third year. So we do have to, I don't know if Melissa Villasenor is a good comparison, but it's at least an interesting part of the discussion where it's like, I want to continue to figure out, like, as Punky grows in her career, if there are good comparisons between her and some other cast members of the past, because I think now is a pivotal point in her career where she may have opportunity to bring in things that she hasn't before. Yeah, I'm not sure if I mean that she's similar at all stylistically to Melissa, but the numbers have been pretty consistent with usage with Melissa. So when I see her data written out, it just reminds me of Melissa a lot, maybe unfortunately so, but yeah, that's fair. That's the case. And we're going to go to our final rookie of season 48 at 13th place in the power rankings, Michael Longfellow, who, no surprise, is the leading rookie of this group of four. 25 appearances puts him 10th in the cast. 21 minutes, 46 seconds put him 13th in screen time. That's pretty high for a rookie. I mean, James Austin Johnson, sets the standard at 30 minutes, 56 seconds in his rookie season. But, for the first 9, he was the only cast member shut out this season. He was not in the Steve Martin and Martin Short episode, but he's had 4 leads, 2 of them being update. So we mentioned Marcelo had those, and that's kind of what we point to talk about Marcelo. But Michael Longfellow was the host of the news sketch in the Amy Schumer episode, which might be the worst sketch of the season, but I think he was pretty good in it. And then he was the lead with Dave Chappelle in the barbershop sketch, which might be arguably the best live sketch of the season by some people. And that was also his best episode statistically. He's been in pre-tapes. The House of Dragon one and the Chappelle one rings a bell. He was also in the Potato Hole one with Dave Chappelle, so that's why he was his best episode. But a lot has been said about Michael Longfellow, comparisons to Pete Davidson, whether he be like a Kevin Nealon type, I think you said, John, maybe behind the desk someday, or he could be, he could be a successor to Colin and Michael, or he could, just be the next great SNL player. But there's been a lot of talk about him. He got such big publicity after the first premiere, a lot of eyeballs on him. He was the only rookie out of this 4 that I was like already following on Instagram. So like was excited to see someone like that make the show. Like, oh, cool, know the person. But I don't know how famous he was other than that. I'm like, he had that many followers, whatever. But Nicole, when you see Michael Longfellow, do you think, wow, this is the next big thing? Or, for lack of a better term, we say on the show a lot, this is a good, funny white guy to put in a sketch because we need a good, funny white guy to put in the sketch?
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to say this because I have been all in favor all the time of, giving other people voices other than, funny white guys. But we have definitely had fewer, a smaller percentage than ever of the show has been funny white guys. And again, I'm no complaints. I like that. We have a lot of different voices. But I think because of that, he feels fresher, not to insult him, but he almost feels like fresher than he is in a way because the cast is no longer like majority, guys who are kind of like this. I feel like he was sort of the archetype, a couple decades ago of SNL, or maybe like the 2023. Oh my God, one of those. That is the year we're in now. When you have to like erase and change it, I'm still there. But yeah, he's like the modern day equivalent of like the original SNL archetype to me, someone who's sort of like dry and irreverent and rejects the standard. I think we sometimes forget that SNL used to be more irreverent than it is now. And I think he embodies that, but also again to the 2023 version, so he feels very fresh yet true to the core of what SNL really is about and what it started as, which is nice. I feel like because of that, he really appeals to OG viewers, older people who love the original show and who like grew up with the original show and have been more hesitant to be fans of it today. But then he also really resonates with young people and our voices and how we think and feel and process things. So I think he's just really poised to have a good run, a good tenure at the show. And we see that, we saw he was put, and this again, we talk about the reality TV equivalents of production, certain people are chosen to be propped up. JAJ in his rookie episode, his premiere episode, propped up. Not only did he do his Trump, but he was chosen to be all over that episode so that he left a mark on all of us viewers for his Trump and for everything else. It was no accident that he was chosen, produced, that sort of thing to be all over that episode so that we would remember him. And Michael Longfellow had the similar thing and has continued to. And, that's a good thing. He's definitely made the biggest mark of the rookies. And that's not necessarily because he's the most talented. Whether he is or not, I think is up for debate. But I think it's mostly because he's in a really good spot to appeal to different people and to just have his moment this year, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And, John, I'll throw it over to you. And I just, maybe I'm being a little biased being a fan of his, but I feel like the show hasn't even scratched the surface of really the comedy style that he has to offer. I think there's been a good showcase of his stand-up abilities because he's, incorporating themes that I've heard in a stand-up before. That I really like. But I just think that his dry delivery at times, but also it's not even about the dryness. It's like about the coolness and the energy is something that we haven't seen in a bit. I mean, maybe you could think of a good comp, but we don't always want to do comps to other cast members. But I think that he has so much comedic chops to bring to this show that might not necessarily be like, oh, he's a great sketch guy like a Kate McKinnon or a Beck Bennett, but something that the show could really take advantage of, and I just really hope they do. What do you think, John?
Well, I think the dry comp is probably Norm. Not that Longfellow is Norm, but there's definitely some, like a little bit of Norm in there. But I've been so impressed. I mean, he definitely wins like the James Austin Johnson Award for the cast member I didn't know I needed on the show, and now he's completely crushing it. And yeah, I mean, every time he's in a sketch, I think he's doing something interesting. I do find even they've been putting him in utility roles, and even then he's had some pretty good one-liners. For me, he fills a void on the show that the show has been drastically missing. And again, I know it is weird. We have discussed this on the roundtables in last month about being like the show like needs a certain style of like the straight white guy, but I don't know that we mean that in the traditional sense. I just mean in terms of like sketch comedy, like the straight role in some of the sketches, the very dry delivery. It's something that we've been missing for a while. And I do think, to Nicole's point, which was really something that got my mind racing, is like, is Longfellow the type of sketch performer that could fit in any era of the show? And I think he could. Like, I really could see him vibing with most of the major eras in the history of SNL from what I've seen in the 9 episodes. And I love it. So for me,
From what John has seen in the 9 episodes that he's seen of SNL, John has only ever seen 9 episodes of this show.
Is that what I said? I meant to say the 9
No,
episodes.
I'm just making a joke because you've seen every episode a billion times.
Yeah.
I'm just making a joke.
Yeah. but yes, agreed. I love what we're getting from Longfellow.
Right. I can't wait to see more. My wish list for the year would be to see him anchor Cold Open. I think that would be really huge. And I think he would do a great job with that and be, front and center. We've heard stories from cast members, on like Fly on the Wall podcast with Dana and Spade. Like that moment when they're counting down, like I think he would just bring a cool energy to that spot, maybe if it's political or not political. And my other wish list would be to see him co-anchor any sketch with our next person in the power rankings, number 12, which is someone he's been compared to. Maybe there's a little bit of a fabricated rivalry in the fan base because we haven't seen them together much, and they might fill similar spaces, and that is Andrew Dismukes at number 12. He's in his 3rd year, 19 appearances, puts him 14th, so we haven't seen him a lot. I think we thought we would after the first 2 episodes we mentioned earlier. 31 minutes and 26 seconds, though, which is a great screen time. That's 12th in the cast, though, because everyone's doing well this season. His best episodes were the first 2 I mentioned, Teller and Gleason. His first season screen time, 9:29. Second season, 22:41. And as I mentioned, now his 3rd season, 31:26. And those are just the first 9 episodes. So, Nicole, I think that you fell in love with Dismukes after the prom photo sketch. Was that it?
Yes.
All right. So tell me, has anything come close to that this season? And, or have you not liked what Andrew's given us so far?
Well, it's not that I haven't liked it, but I think for me, it was exactly that prom sketch where it was just that perfect type of moment where you can see someone is acting and performing in an amazing way, and you can also just instantly tell that their voice was behind the sketch and that every character in the sketch is that person's point of view, and that they were involved in it. It was just one of those special moments. I would also again compare Punky's moment with Big Boys. You could feel that influence in that, which is amazing. It's a great moment to feel that way about a sketch and a cast member. Yeah, that was the moment for me where I was so excited about him. And you had a perfect segue when you said there have been comparisons between him and Longfellow. There have been maybe debates as to whether one is sort of eclipsing the other or one is taking screen time away from the other. And I think they absolutely take screen time away from each other. And yeah, I mean, we talked about how it, for whatever reason, Cecily has indirectly taken time away from Dismukes, but I think Longfellow is being given a lot of roles that would otherwise go to Dismukes, and maybe that's because the show doesn't feel that it has to put in that effort with Dismukes because he already has people like me who love to see him anytime we see him. But when you have a fresh face, it's like, again, production. That's my theme of this episode, is talking about that. You got me going with that, John. But so I think there is that, but I think it's mutual. I don't think it's a one-sided thing at all. I think they take opportunities from each other, and the world would be, maybe we could find world peace if they became a an amazing duo that partnered up more frequently. Maybe that would save the world.
Yeah, I just think I could easily see them playing brothers in a sketch, or even playing rival coworkers in a kind of a meta way or something. But we've had headshots in the Gleason episode, the big penis therapy in the Amy Schumer episode, the Joker wedding, which much maligned, but I was a fan. I counted all the Jokers. It was a great time. And the Christmas Epiphany episode in the Austin Butler one. So, John, of those four, what was your favorite, and why do we love Andrew?
Oh, definitely Christmas Epiphany. And I love Andrew even more now because the Hollywood Reporter interviewed a bunch of cast members and asked them what their favorite sketches of all time were. And his was Spelling Bee, the famous Will Forte sketch. So, yeah, couldn't love Dismukes more. But I completely disagree with the sentiment that Dismukes and Longfellow are anywhere near the same type of cast member. I don't see it at all. Like, if anything, I think that Longfellow's more Bill Hader and Dismukes is more Will Forte.
Their energies are so different too.
Yeah, I don't see it. Like I it's possible that in this limited amount of time they're affecting each other in terms of like the cast is like, yeah, let's get Longfellow in there instead of Dismukes in a typical utility role. But I just don't see Dismukes as a utility player at this point. I think he just brings such a unique voice to the show that is just pure weird. And I think, like, you know, I want Andrew in the show more, but to put him at a table, you know, sitting around a table, having no, you know, weird lines and having nothing to do with the concept of the sketch would probably be a waste of his talents. So, you know, if we're going to limit his analytics, but he carves out a more consistent role in the show moving forward, I'm okay with that.
Right. And Dismukes is like the perfect person to talk about when we talk about like quality versus quantity, or like, you know, do you appear more or do you rather appear less for a longer time? So that's just a perfect example is Andrew Dismukes, because when he does that Beanie Baby sketch or something like that, where he just like goes from 0 to 100, like that's where I want Andrew. So you're great point to bring up. Like, I don't want to see him just being the fourth player in a sketch, because, you know, maybe there are other cast members better suited for that, and that's obviously not what he's suited for. So the next cast member we're talking about will be probably pretty brief. We have our two update anchors, and, you know, who do you guys think is ranking lower and statistically?
I assume Che.
Unfortunately, any regular person, you know, anyone who tunes into the show knows the answer. Anyone who doesn't ever tune into the show would probably not have an answer, but, you know, we've been down this hole many times.
Yep, it is Michael Che at number 11, and it's his 9th season on the show. So this is our first person we've talked about that's really been on the show for a while, but in a very different capacity as a co-anchor of Weekend Update. 10 appearances, which obviously ties him with Colin Jost. Michael Che appeared very briefly in the Steve Martin Short PDD pre-tape, and Colin appeared with Cecily in her send-off sketch. So they both have appeared 10 times. Michael Che has 32 minutes, 55 seconds, which ranks him 11th in the cast and 11th in power ranking, as we see. His best episode specifically was the Miles Teller episode. He had a lot of screen time in that. It's been, you know, we'll do a deeper dive on Update probably near the end of the season. Hopefully we get a joke swap from these two, and I think we're going to keep it real brief with these two. So maybe Nicole, I'll go to you for Che, and Jost, I'll go to you, John, unless you have something to say on either. But I wanted to ask you guys, I feel like there's a lot of clues or just sentiment or feeling that this could be it for this duo. So we can save the retrospectives, you know, the legacy of these two for a future show. But what do we want, Nicole? What do we want to see Michael Che do this season if it's his last season? What's the one thing that you're like, why can't Michael Che do that? Or I want to see that again.
I want to see him pop up in sketches more. You know, Jost and Che can be the longest tenured Update anchors of all time, and that's great, but it's only great if they are, you know, stepping outside the box. Like, it's boring for people who have for them to have been in that role for so long and to rarely step outside of it. I think they need to be continuing to, you know, reinvent the wheel for me to really be happy for them to still be here. And Che is very funny when he pops up at random and when you don't expect it. He's really, really funny. Joke swaps, we have not seen them recently, and that worries me because we cannot not have at least one more. So I do hope we see one, but I'm not feeling so convinced that we will. But my main thing with Che more than Jost is I want to see him pop up in sketches. And Jost, I'll save this, but Jost I love at the desk, and I'm a Jost cold open person. I think he writes really good ones. So Che, I want him just to be random in sketches. If he decides it's his last season and all of a sudden he's in like 1 or 2 sketches a week, like making up his own rules, completely changing his form, like go for it. I think that would just be like stupid and fun, So that's what I want.
Mike, you're on mute. Just make sure you fix that. Mike?
Definitely want to see Che do things out of the ordinary. Even when he put on like props with the trend forecasters, I was like, Michael Che is doing new comedy, which was fun. So yeah, we'll move on and we can wrap up with Colin Jost when we get to him. But our next cast member is, I think, pretty much unequivocally the standout of this season, just based on expectation versus reality, and gets talked about the most on the podcast. So we're talking about Sarah Sherman, who's in her second year. And let me put this picture on the screen.
Yeah, it's coming up.
Okay. But
Yeah,
Sarah Sherman.
I'm excited to talk about Sarah.
Yeah. 30 appearances puts her 8th. So in a cast of 17, that's pretty good for a second-year player who's, featured still. 36 minutes, 48 seconds puts her 9th. Her screen time is up 173.6% this season compared to last, through 9 episodes, which is the biggest increase in the cast. She had 2 back-to-back update spots, one on the Chappelle episode, one in the Kiki Palmer episode. She had the Eyes sketch, which was 10-1 in Gleason, the Jewish Elvis sketch, and the Austin Butler Jurors sketch with Amy Schumer. So those were some notable appearances from Sarah. Also played Chuck Schumer and a cold open. So we've seen Sarah do a ton. I think she has more fans, exponentially since last season. So I got to go to Nicole first. What do you think about Sarah Sherman, and what have you not seen yet? I think I asked you this at the very beginning of the season that you said you wanted to see political impressions. We got one already. So anything else? I mean, we've all your Sarah takes are on tape already, but I have to go to you for one more.
Yeah, I don't know that anything I feel I haven't already expressed many times here, but I have an opportunity to say it all again. So I'm happy to have that. She has had an amazing season. I mean, I have been a fan for a long time, and in her first season, I feel like I was as much of a fan then as I am now, but it's really cool to see the show and the fan community kind of catch up to that. Not to say that I'm not usually like I had an opinion before other people.
You're a trendsetter.
Maybe. I usually wouldn't say that about myself, but this time I will. I think that we're seeing just such an incredible rise. I mean, the Jewish Elvis sketch, for any Jews out there, non-Jews out there, whatever, like that was just such a revelation and so much fun. I can't hear that song without singing delicious cheese instead of the real words. Like, when somebody leaves a mark that, again, that transcendent, something that transcends your original context for it, that's powerful. And that's another thing at the heart of original SNL is when it takes the world around you, whether past or present or future, and it gives it new meaning and fresh meaning. Elvis, maybe there was a new movie about him, but still he has been gone for a long time, and his influence was a long time ago. And so for her to bring a fresh take on it, I wouldn't say that Austin Butler in Elvis was as fresh as it was, accurate. I think it was just accurate. I don't think he brought something that we hadn't seen in the discussion of who Elvis was. Sarah obviously did exactly that. She brought a new take on something that we've talked about too much. We as a society have talked about Elvis too much. And yet when she did it, I was hooked. I just can't say enough good things. I'm so excited. But also I brought this up last time. I think she still has that underdog quality about her that I don't want her to lose. It's not like she just writes something and it gets on the show instantly. The Jewish Elvis sketch was supposed to, she had that planned months before it actually made it onto the show. And, of course it couldn't have been more perfect for it to air for it to come to fruition for the Austin Butler episode A, and B, right, during Hanukkah, right before Hanukkah. So things like that, I think it's just really rewarding and gratifying to be a fan of hers, not just to see her successes, but also to see that underdog quality, to see her win in that, to see her, rooting for her and wanting to see more of her, and then getting that is really gratifying. And so there is that like edge of like, she's so different and irreverent, and I want to feel, I kind of want to gatekeep a little bit. I do. I think she would understand what I mean. Like, I kind of want to gatekeep the way that I'm a fan of her. And I think she would be okay with how I feel about that.
I feel that. And John, my question for you is, is there a risk of Sarah blowing up this big, this fast for overexposure? I mean, no one, even her worst critic, could say that she's, unoriginal. She's obviously very original, and which might be why she's talked about so much, because there is stuff to talk about. You're not just saying it for the sake of saying it. So is there any risk of Sarah being in the show too much, or is the sky the limit for Sarah Sherman?
Sky's the limit. I mean, I don't think that there's, everyone's going to have their haters, but, F them. So like, Sarah to me is, when you're looking at her, you're looking at, the future, like one of the biggest celebrities in the entire world. That's what you're looking at when you're looking at Sarah. Like, she's going to have a great career on SNL. You can see it now. She's going to have an incredible movie career after the show is over. Like, they found gold. And it's, like, to me, it's been a while. So I'm just very excited that like we're in the Sarah Sherman era. And yeah, I love it.
Still so young too. I think me and her share the same birth date. So we have a big birthday.
Same day and year?
Same day and year, I believe, yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing.
So if you think that
That's
me
cool.
and Sarah Sherman have the exact same personality, then we just proved astrology is real.
I see.
So we're going to move on to her contemporary in his second season, which is James Austin Johnson. So last year, playing Biden and Trump, played 6 of each, 6 Bidens and 6 Trumps. This year, 1 Biden, 5 Trumps through the first 9. So, John, I want to start with you while I pull up the picture, but I'll give some more context. But James Austin Johnson, any surprises so far?
Just really that I haven't seen him sort of diversify from what we saw last year. Like, yes, he's played a little bit of like, train conductor or, movie
spot, by the way.
So yeah, that was pretty funny. Or like, movie like agent or director or whatever it is. Like he is filling something on the show. Like, and don't get me wrong, like he's good. He's pretty much good in everything he does. But like, I do want to see, if I had to nitpick, I'm looking for a little bit more range from JJ at this point. Also, like, for someone who has such a unique voice or voices or a unique personality, really like no characters from James Austin Johnson thus far in his career. So like, that's something I would like to see moving forward, is like, can he create original characters that he can bring to the show beyond just being the impression guy, or anytime you need someone with a unique voice for a sketch?
Agreed with that. And if you follow his social media, he definitely has original characters. So I'm hoping we see some. 37 appearances is, that's the next one. 29 appearances puts him 9th. 35 minutes, 41 seconds puts him 10th. For screen time, he's been in 6 cold opens, tied for the third most. 47% of the screen time is in cold opens. So that, goes again to the 5 Trumps and 1 Biden so far. All those impressions are always in the cold open, which I think there's been consensus that both those impressions are great, but they would be really funny in like a sketch or outside a cold open. So I hope we see that too. I'm not holding my breath, but it's possible. And he also he inherited 2 new impressions this season previously from Beck Bennett, which is the My Pillow guy, and Mitch McConnell. So we saw 2 new ones, but last year when we saw Louis C.K. and Adam Driver impressions and things like that, I was like really excited to see how good he was at just not doing Trump, because he's like known for being Trump, and his impression is the best of all time. But Nicole Rovine, what say you on JAJ?
Yeah, I kind of expressed my thoughts earlier, but I think he might have suffered in starting so strong, you know? Again, that sort of underdog, I don't want to say victim because you know, people overuse that word. It's not what I mean, but there's just something so fun in being a fan of someone and watching them grow. And with him, when you see him right off the bat being a star, it's different to be a fan and root for someone when they've already, you know, the sky's the limit. We just said about Sarah, but when you've already touched the sky in your first moment of the show, where do you go from there? And so, I mean, I feel like this is crazy. I think he has so much more to give. I also think we've probably seen his best work already, which is like almost morbid to say, but that's how I feel. You know, I think he needs to sort of pivot to have momentum. You know, I was talking about Marcelo and how being pigeonholed as the young guy there's wings to grow from that, but I think that JAJ needs to sort of pivot to other things. You know, I feel like if we didn't see his Trump for like a year and we only ever saw him doing different things, that could be really good for him. And you know, because I think we all know his Trump impression is amazing, but I wonder if I sometimes put some of my Trump frustrations onto him. I know I certainly did that with Alec Baldwin. I think I started to sort of conflate the two in many ways. And I think subconsciously that could be happening with JJ too. I always will talk about how Kate McKinnon put so much empathy into her political impressions, and that's why I think she's one of the best political impressions of all time. But with JJ, he's just so technically accurate that it's a little scary. So I think if he moved away from that, he could become more like root forable.
Yeah, I find him easy to root for, but I definitely feel like there's some mystery behind him a little bit. He plays older characters really well and has kind of an old school voice. Like I think John is kind of alluding to, plays game show hosts well. Like there's something about that makes him mysterious. I mean, impressionists by nature sometimes are because they are hiding behind a persona. That's what they're doing on you know, purposely. But so I definitely, you know, that's the best take, John, is that we need to see a character from him. Like I can't even really think of one if there has been, but maybe a type, like when he did that, whatever the Cousins, Jake Gyllenhaal one we all talked about a lot, when he played that, like, you know, wimpy boyfriend role so well that, you know, something like that for sure we know he can do. But to like, yeah, really see him go off the rails. Maybe he did slightly in that news sketch I alluded to from Amy Schumer. He was kind of a wacky guy in that sketch, which I thought was pretty fun. Chloe Fineman is up next, and we talked about her near the beginning, but bringing her up now, 37 appearances, again, puts her second in the cast. 40 minutes, 42 seconds puts her eighth. She's been in 12 pre-tapes, more than anyone, but really only led one live sketch, which was a pretty forgettable sketch. It was the Marilyn Monroe blonde sketch from the Brendan Gleeson episode. And I think I want to just throw it out there to both of you. Do you think that Chloe has a long SNL career ahead of her, or would it make more sense for her to ride this peak and, you know, leave while she's ahead?
I think the latter. I could see her doing total, you know, like a 5-year, like bring that back. You know, I don't think it's a bad thing to bring back this sort of 5-6 year tenures of people who become megastars after that. You know, we haven't seen that a lot. We've seen people who do 5-6 seasons because, you know, maybe they didn't have the best run on the show, or maybe they felt like they had given it everything they could. I want to see that again. I want to see, you know, the way the show allows certain people to leave and come back and do different projects is amazing. But what if someone is just so booked and busy that that's not even good enough? I think, again, it's good to be missed. So I do think she could be the perfect person to like bring that trend back.
I mean, I think she's going to be on the show a while. I mean, like, what's really the difference between her and JAJ? Like that they're like she's a woman and JJ's a man, and the
Like
president
she goes to the Met Gala.
I get that, but that's not on the show. Like I think like if your argument, Nicole, is that she has too much going on off the show to stay there a long time, like that I can't argue with, because like that's everyone's like own unique situation, and she certainly has like star quality to her. But like again, like she's just like a female impressionist on the show. Like if Hillary was president right now, like Chloe would be playing Hillary probably. So like, and then we'd all be looking at her like JJ. And being like, okay, she plays the president. She does like a bunch of other impressions. She does some like unique roles, and she's carving her place in the show. But like the analytics are really good for her right now. Clearly, they believe in her, so much so that they are going to send her to the Miley Dolly New Year's thing. And yeah, I think she's having like a really good time. And I know of like a lot of our fans and listeners like sometimes have said like we don't get Chloe, and that's fine. Maybe she's just like the type of performer that has like a really unique voice that doesn't appeal to everybody.
Definitely looks good statistically for Chloe. She's third most improved screen time from this time last year. 151% more screen time than she did in season 47 at this point. And it's just been like really solid. Had the Chappelle and the Keke Palmer episode kind of disappeared, but every other episode has been 5-6 minutes. So Chloe Fineman, I think, is benefiting from departure of 80 Kate and now Cecily. But just like, yeah, I think they're using her differently this year. I don't know if you guys feel that. We talked about how sometimes she is isolated in a pre-tape and does impressions, but yeah, I think that there's so much room. We talked so much about the Britney Spears cold opens last year, and I thought her Pelosi was like unreal. Maybe it got, overshadowed by a more loud impression from Sarah next to her, but her Pelosi was like unbelievably good. So I'm kind of bummed that we won't see that probably now. But
Nancy could surprise you.
Yeah, I mean, there's always
something funny that's worth. I have to just agree with you with that. I think that was like the most perfect cold open moment of the season because it brought together that like goofy ridiculousness with like the accuracy and precision, and it's just like that's like cold opens at their best, and it was magic.
Right. So before we wrap up, from Chloe, what do we need more of? I mean, she's been in duos with Heidi twice. She's done the Jennifer Coolidge and Nicole Kidman pre-tapes and popping up everywhere. But I feel like we talked about her more last season when we were missing her, and now we're getting a lot of her. And maybe I don't hear a lot of love in the fan base for her, but I could be just missing it.
I just think maybe it's just more in live sketches. She seems to be a really great pre-tape performer, but like you said, Mike, only seemed to have anchored one live sketch so far this season. And clearly she has it in her, but it needs to translate more. So that's probably the one spot I would look at this point to look for an improvement in the second half of the season. And she is certainly going to have the space to do it. So now it will be interesting to see what happens.
For
I
sure.
agree.
And I think she, will take advantage of this spot, and I think I hope we do anyway, see her one more year. So maybe she could be like a five and done person, like Nicole said. So we got to Colin Jost, number 7. So John, I'm going to go to you. Colin had a huge night of screen time, not just because he popped in to deliver maybe the worst singing in SNL history behind Cecily, but he had so much time on Update that night. He's appeared 10 times, same as Che, and 55 minutes, 23 seconds. He made up a lot of time there, but we've been seeing less Che on Update than we have in previous years. So sometimes he's like top 3 in power rankings. Now he's 7. John, if you think this is Colin Jost last year, what is one thing that we need to see other than, it would be fun to see him somewhere else? Is there any brand of humor that Colin Jost writing, maybe if you don't want to talk about him on camera, that we need more of other than political cold opens? Any takes on Colin Jost for the quick one here?
I just think like underrated, of this underrated moment of the season potentially is just how, or a storyline of the season is how strong his writing has been. Obviously, stepping down from head writer prior to the season and maybe gives him more time to write very solid sketches. But I think he's been a really strong writer, and I think like this whole narrative of like, I think like the hardest thing or the thing that I disagree with the most a lot of times with our live chat, and like I appreciate everybody who's here, so I'm not trying to pick on any one of you, but sometimes I see a lot in our chat being like, hey, like Colin like didn't really bring it tonight, or like Che didn't really bring it tonight, or like they don't seem like that into update. And I find like that is the hardest take for me to like back, because I find it like really, really like hard to like judge when somebody's not bringing it on update in a given night. So I'll give it on the Butler episode that he definitely looked off, which is understandable due to his relationship with Cecily. But I don't necessarily think like he's been like completely off all season on update. Like he's been pretty good.
Yeah, I think they've been strong as a duo. Maybe they just feel like a vestige of the last era. That's
that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they've hung around too long, but it definitely maybe feels more apparent with a big featured class right now. I mean, him being in his 10th season, he's been on the show even longer as a writer. Hard to believe that Seth Meyers was on for 13 seasons, because I can't even imagine Colin being behind the desk for 3 more seasons. I know he started on the desk, Jost did, but I feel like the Che and Jost era is coming to a close pretty soon. So it's speculation about what will come next, but before they do leave, we want the last joke swap for sure. I can't imagine they don't do that. They didn't do it because of the Paul Rudd episode when no one was there, and they didn't do it at the Christmas episode just this past month. So going into our last few, this is a cast member that I think in our first season of By the Numbers, I would not stop talking about, and has definitely not been up and down, has stayed in the top. But I'm talking about Ego Wodum, who I kept talking about being the next big star of SNL. And, see her on the commercials on TV. I don't know if she's getting talked about enough outside the show. And I know the fan base loves her. But this is Ego Wodum in 6th. She's in her 5th season, 33 appearances, tied with Bowen for 4th. 55 minutes, 14 seconds, puts her 5th in screen time. She's also tied for the most live sketch appearances, 23 with Heidi. An interesting stat about Ego, 18% of her screen time has been in 10-to-1s, which is the highest percentage in the cast, which, don't think of Ego as a 10-to-1 person, but here we are with 18%, which is pretty high considering she has such high screen time numbers. So Nicole, when you think about Ego this season, has there been improvement, or is it just in the numbers? Because we've seen Ego do so much good things in her career so far that I don't know if anything has been surprising to me other than just like, hey, solid, good job.
Yeah, I mean, that stat about 10-to-1s is I would never have guessed at all. So that's really interesting. But also she's someone who I like to hear stats that surprise me about her, because she's probably the only person in the top like 7 who I'm like, we don't see nearly enough of her. Everyone else in the top 7, I'm like, yeah, we see them a lot, and I love that. She's like, I want to see her so much more. I think anytime we really see her in her element, it's just like iconic and like magnetic and amazing. I mean, the parent teacher conference sketch with Jason last year was huge in our community. People just loved it, thought it was like
voted the best, right?
Yeah. It was like the perfect SNL sketch in so many ways. It had everything. It was amazing. And it had her voice, the Meg Thee Stallion episode. Ego's voice was all over. I mean, there's no way she slept that week, because, she was writing so much, she was in so much, like, and when it's cool to see that. It's cool to see that. And I want to see more of her across the board. I do think there hasn't been like upward kind of movement with her in a couple seasons, because she is someone who, like, in her 3rd season, I would say, we were talking about so much of like how she's having an amazing season, and it was great. And then I would say she's been like really steady and reliable and a great cast member since then. But yeah, I do want to see more of her.
John?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't really have any strong take here on Ego, to be honest. I mean, I think that she's fantastic and has amazing star quality every time we get to see her on screen. I'm just looking forward to seeing what she's going to bring to the second half of the season, because like every few episodes she comes out with something really fun. So for me, no complaints about Ego, and it's hard for me to nitpick.
Yeah, I'm glad, Nicole, you mentioned the Meg Thee Stallion episode, not only because she was in it a lot, but that classroom sketch when she played like the substitute teacher, I think was my favorite sketch of the season, maybe until like the barbershop sketch or something like that came after it. But just unbelievably
really
good in that one. You know, had Dionne Warwick standout moments last year, of course. So maybe I'm hoping that there'll be something that really picks up traction for, we're hoping for recurring characters. So I don't know if we would see that substitute teacher again, but I would love to see it again because she was so good. We're gonna move on to Mikey Day in his 7th season. So now with the departure of Cecily, really, one of the vets came in with Alex Moffat and Melissa Villaseñor as cast member, but was a writer previously. And 32 appearances puts him 6th. 53 minutes, 43 seconds puts him 7th in screen time. Exactly 50% on the nose of his time has been in live sketches. So he's really definitely known as a guy who's does a lot of work outside cold opens, monologues, and weekend update as far as the live portion of the show. His best episode was the Miles Teller episode. He played Ronald McDonald and did the rooftop bar sketch with Miles Teller. He also did the Blood Oath sketch with Brendan Gleeson. And I think maybe his best sketch of all time, which was the heaven scene from Dave Chappelle. Nicole, Mikey Day in his 7th season, leaving it all out in the field. What do you think about Mikey Day?
Yeah, I mean, as we talk about, he is the quintessential person who we see more than we think we see, objectively on screen, and also his influence on the show. Anyone who was a writer before they were a cast member, their influence on the tone of the show, on the writing of the show, is more prominent than it seems, So, of course, his collaborations with Streeter, like we see that even if we don't realize we see it, like all over the place. And I think he's given us that. Like probably one of my favorite Mikey moments was the SNL at Homes when he did a sketch with his son, and it was like all those pranks, putting like nails on the toilet and doing silly things like that. I feel like he is one of the cast members who doesn't like infuse who he is enough into it. Like there are other people who have star power outside the show and they make their personal lives a reason to want to see what they're doing. Of course, Pete Davidson maybe was an oversharer, maybe to his own detriment, but like that makes people fans of you and that makes people invested in your journey on the show. And that was maybe my favorite moment of his, was when we got to see into that and see his son and him just being goofy.
Nicole, I quoted the Gigi Hadid thing the other day, so thanks for bringing that one up. Changing all his contacts to Gigi Hadid.
That was perfect. Exactly. So yeah, I think that's the one thing he's missing. I think either he has plateaued and he had a great career and he could be done, or go on Update and like talk about some random anecdote about your son, or like bring your son on Update, like, let us in a little more, because I think what he brings to the show, it's sort of, there's still this anonymity, I can't speak, but like there's still this like, thing about him where we're like, we don't know who he is. We just know that he is everywhere.
Right. And John, I'm looking at the list, the cast list. I see, if he came back next season, he'd be tying people like Phil Hartman, Will Forte, Bill Hader, Beck Bennett, people who stayed 8 seasons. And I think the people I just named, people, were devastated to see those names when they left. So if Mikey Day leaves after 7, maybe there's nothing left to be seen, but he's definitely been a glue guy, like Beck Bennett, Phil Hartman, you would definitely say that about for sure. So when we come to Mikey Day, who's, older than we think, he's, how old is Mikey Day? 43 almost. So it's like older than we might think, because he still plays like young roles pretty well. So if his time on the show, like kind of like I asked Nicole with Che and you with Colin, like, do you think that there's something that we want to see from Mikey in the second half of the season?
I mean, not really. I think the show is happy that they have him on, so there's some sense of familiarity there, given all the departures. I I think Mikey sometimes like really brings it, so I do enjoy it. I think he's probably one of those cast members that like it's gonna take a few years of him not being on the show for then me to properly contextualize and analyze his time on the show. But this season has been like a little bit of a mixed bag for me with Mikey. I had really high expectations coming in, thinking that he was going to be one of the dominant players in this season. And I guess he's fifth in the power ranking, so it's not like he hasn't, but like he has disappeared for weird amounts of times. There's been like whole episodes that have been like, where was Mikey that night? And I find that bizarre in a year where he is like clearly one of the veterans and most important members of the cast. But yeah, I mean, I've always liked Mikey throughout his career. I never felt like he was the star of the show. I never felt like he should be the star of the show. And I also never felt like he wanted to be the star of the show. So for me, like, I think he's just having a typical season for him. And I think that the difference between some of the cast members that you listed that lasted 8 years versus Mikey is like they probably had some more star potential than Mikey did, which isn't offensive to Mikey because I think he's a writer at heart.
Absolutely. And like with Colin, I'm someone that you won't realize wrote some of your favorite sketches. So when the writing isn't there, that'll show up to the detriment of the show, but hopefully replaced by fresher voices in the meantime. Number 4 in the power rankings this season. Oh, I don't know if it's possible. Maybe I'll regret saying this, but isn't being talked about enough because I feel like they've been the most talked about person, maybe outside the fan base, but it's Bowen Yang, because I feel like the chatter on Bowen Yang maybe has gone a little cold lately, and I think he's having a phenomenal season. And I was asked in a DM about who is like filling a like Kate McKinnon point of view, or not point of view, but like a archetype, not even archetype, just who is filling a void from Kate McKinnon. I'm like, it's Bowen. I just didn't realize it until now, because we want to go to it's Heidi, it's Sarah, because we want to go to a female cast member or something, but it's Bowen Yang because he is so good with hosts. And I was looking at his season this so far, the Hello Kitty sketch with Kiki Palmer, Bartenders with Jack Harlow, and Jurors with Amy Schumer. All I think were strong sketches because Bowen Yang made the host funnier. So I think the hosts were great. I mean, Amy Schumer is a comedian. Kiki was great. Jack Harlow being a musician doing double duty. Bowen Yang maybe did a little more heavy lifting, but he's in tie with Ego for appearances at 33, 54 minutes, 55 seconds, puts him 6th in the cast in screen time. So we love Bowen on the show. We love Bowen. Nicole, what do you think? Do you think that, I mean, he's the star of the show, right? I mean, it's not Sarah Sherman. It's Bowen Yang.
Well, when you said the Kate comparison, immediately what went to my mind was who would play themselves and just use their name, and it's like everybody's on board. That was Kate, and now it's Bowen. Bowen can just be himself in a game show, or break character to talk to the audience. Like that was Kate, and now it's Bowen. And I don't think there's really anyone else who can do it so casually. Sarah does it in like an anti-casual way, in like a chaotic way. And in a way that's
he's
like,
made for SNL, I think.
Oh my God, yeah. And he talks about that. I mean, any readers out there, like if you listen to Las Culturistas, he said that like he feels like he's very fortunate in that his skill set and the way that he is as a comedian, as a collaborator, like he is just so well poised and well positioned to thrive on the show, and he knows it. Like it's a great thing. But yeah, I think like the way Sarah will play herself in like, again, a chaotic way, Bowen can like ground a sketch by just talking to the audience and being himself, and anchoring it in like without being like inherently like him as himself doesn't have to be inherently comedic. It's just sort of like it can be like an audience surrogate because like everybody knows who Bowen is. He's like he has that fame. So yeah, I mean, we all know I love Bowen. I think I do want to see more from him. I feel like I just, for me, I always want to see more from him, but he's busy. We've compared him to Chloe. They came in together. he's going to be in the Wicked movie, which to me, there is no more impressive gig in the world than being cast in the Wicked movie. So movies plural, actually. So he's busy. He is in demand. I think he's the next person to be granted special privileges to take a few weeks off when he needs to. And that's fine with me. I always talk about being in favor of those stars, letting them kind of spread their wings and then in turn make the show more relevant because they have time to become stars outside the show. I'm always in favor of that. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm in favor of it in moderation because it's more impactful that way. So yeah, I want to see more from him on the show. I also want him to continue being a massive star outside the show. That's like equally something I want, you know?
Yeah, we could use more Bowen, but we have 169% more Bowen this season than last season. So number 1 was Sarah, number 2 Bowen, number 3 Chloe. So there are 3 most improved via screen time metric are those 3. So Bowen Yang, somebody for me that, you know, there's a danger of being too repetitive with his style that you kind of get worried like, oh, I never want to see I never want to see Bowen Yang pop up and go, oh, it's this again. And like he proves me wrong. Like I think this season has been so good for him. And John, have you become more of a Bowen fan this season, or what do you think?
I mean, no, like I'm a Bowen fan. Like I like Bowen, and I think he's a great cast member. I think we need to like relax a little bit. Like he's not like Chevy Chase. Like, you know, like
it's true.
Yeah, I mean, this is like we kept joking about Nicole taking him first in the draft, but at least I understood that sentiment because at the beginning of the season, I do see like the meteoric rise in the stardom and the potential to be that. But like, there is no way that anybody could watch the first 9 episodes of the season and walk away telling me that Bowen Yang is the star of season 48. Like that has to be, you had to have been being sarcastic, Mike, because I think he is great and he's had his moments on the show and he is a fantastic cast member. But like everybody, like chill.
You're right, and I think when I mean about the star of the show, those are my exact words. Or that like maybe Nicole put it a little better than I did. Whereas like it just seems like Bowen has free range on the show. Like
sure,
it seemed like where a Heidi or an Ego or a Chloe is still kind of like showing up, clocking in at 30 Rock, where Bowen Yang walks in and it's like he can do whatever he wants. Whereas like that's how I always felt about Kate. So it seems like the star power has definitely gone up a lot of notches for him. Whereas I would never say that about Kenan because Kenan is Kenan. I guess that's what I mean. Maybe I said it poorly.
I'll co-sign that and say like the working definition of star of the show, I think that Mike and I are using is actually that they're not spending the majority of their time on the show, clocking in, spending maximum time.
Is this? Like, not that I want to get into this whole thing, but like definition.
No, it's an interesting conversation. I think
you said your definition of the star of the show has nothing to do with the actual.
How about this? It's the biggest star who is on the show.
Okay, so like the highest K rating, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the person who's most in demand outside of the show. The biggest star who is on the show. Can't say it better than that of what we're talking about.
But in that case, you're saying like Pete was the biggest star of the show and then he left. And now it's Bowen.
Yeah, sort of.
Because like if that's the criteria you're using, then if we would have done this last season, you would say Pete is the star of the show, which I don't think you would have said.
Yeah, I'm using. I mean, we'll play with the language, but I think that's sort of what I'm saying.
Okay.
We move on. We're moving on to Heidi Gardner. So just for some more, just really volatile, like hot takes. For Heidi Gardner, if you got them, different than Bowen Yang. But I mean, I'll go back to my McLaughlin group. John, is Heidi Gardner officially SNL's new leading lady?
Yes, 1000%. Yes. Like, I guess like in a way, like she's a star of the show because like she is.
That was my next question.
Right.
Is she the star of the show?
I mean, let's just be real. Like again, she's just crushing it in everything she does. And yeah, I all jokes aside, I don't think Heidi is the star of the show because I don't think that star is simply just like my definition of the star of the show is not just simply padding the stats, but it's also having like impactful moments on the show, which is why I'm like leaning towards that Sarah is becoming the star of the show, even though she's not high up in the power rankings. Like every moment is impactful. That's really what I use as a criteria. But as far as like, just being like solid and consistent on the show, like Heidi is crushing it on every level, and she's delivering in all aspects of what you would look for from a cast member. And this is like, this is her time. This is like the moment that she's been waiting for years on the show, is to like have this, like the open road ahead of her to do whatever she wants with SNL. And that's her future for now. So, and I think she's going to be around another few years.
Absolutely. I think Heidi Gardner is a perfect example of like, pay your dues, and when it's your time, it'll be your time, because we see, unfortunately, that happen not a lot. That we just lived through an era of people staying a long time on the show, so maybe a bad time to be waiting in the wings. But Heidi Gardner is somebody who did wait it out and is now like in all stats is like crushing it. I looking at her like, the back of the Heidi Gardner baseball card. It's like, oh, she's not lacking in any category. She's even been an update twice. I actually really, really liked her like great aunt update appearance. I think I might be alone in that. I gave praise to Chloe's Elmo last year, so maybe this is it. If people really hated that one, I thought it was great. Nicole, so she's 38 appearances, which first in the cast. So even just like that right there, Heidi Gardner for you, is this somebody that SNL should invest in for 3 more seasons, or is this somebody who should finally reach the top and then we go back, we kind of go to the bottom of the cast and they rise up, and then the bottom of the cast rises up, and then we just kind of rinse and repeat?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say she's in direct opposition to the way I was talking about Bowen, in that the vast majority of the things I see her in, or the things that the things I see her in are SNL. I think for the longest tenured woman cast member, it's like, why isn't she a movie star? Why isn't she having 4-episode arcs on hit TV shows? Why isn't she, doing those things? And she absolutely was a victim of the best time in SNL's history for women on the show, which it was the last 10 years with Kate, AD, and Cecily. You cannot argue with that. And unfortunately, being an amazing time for women actually really hurt her, because here she is so many years after she started, and I think she's not as, the things she's bringing are things she's been bringing this whole time. They're not like that new and inventive compared to what we've been seeing from her. It's just that she's been waiting in the wings with these things, and we've been seeing them in moderation over years, that now it doesn't feel that new to me, because we have been seeing it. So, that's sort of my take is, I think definitely a victim of timing. But it's, again, I mean, she's doing great objectively. You can't argue with that. So that's kind of my take.
Fair enough. I mean, I'll definitely take more Heidi. I think that, I guess I'm curious. I mean, as the power ranking goes on, she was at one point in the season number 1. So it's pretty hard to pass Kenan at any point in your career. Because it's an average over the season. So Kenan's back at number 1. Cecily actually took the number 2 spot in the power ranking, and we did a lot of Cecily talk after the Austin Butler episode, and just talking about her career in general, and we looked at her entire stat sheet for the season. So I'm gonna skip right to Kenan. So please get your Kenan takes ready. I want to hear from the chat on this one. So I'm gonna look at the comments here, see what people think about Kenan's season, because last year Kenan like just shattered through a lot of stats that we had seen of his, not appearance wise, but he was pretty close, right, John?
Yeah, I think he was having, if not his best season, one of his like top 3 best seasons last year.
Right. So now it's his 20th season. Rumors about, I mean, at that point, how it's I compare him to Tom Brady, because you just say, when is it going to be enough? But when you're performing at a high level, it's kind of hard to walk away from it. And especially as we approach season 50, and just the eras that Kenan has lived through. I mean, as a cast member, he was a cast member basically when Marcelo was born, probably. I don't know. But here we are with Kenan Thompson, number 1 in the power rankings. He has been in the show 36 times this year, which is 3rd in the cast, and behind only Cecily Strong in screen time with 58 minutes, 54 seconds. His best episode of the season was the Miles Teller episode. I think we'll see probably him break that later. Nicole, go to you first. Kenan Thompson, sound like a broken record. No surprise. He's at the top. But what have you seen from Kenan this year that sticks out for you?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, not that much. I think I guess Kenan and Kelly sticks out. I think Kenan is like the king of just nostalgia in general. He's just such a comforting figure to people. Like anyone at any age has had him in their lives, whether you were watching him 30 years ago at this point as a child actor to any time in the last 20 years on SNL. So many people have had that connection, whether they realize it or not. Like, you've watched Kenan on television before, anyone who has a television or has had one for the last 30 years at any point. So, I think him leaning into that, especially, I think we can confidently say he's at the, back end of his career, whether he stays 1 more season or 5 more seasons, he's at the back end of his career. Again, like Tom Brady has been at the back end of his career for a few years now. So I think on his way out the door, again, 1 year, 5 years, I think leaning into that nostalgia more can only help him. I think, of course, there's the Kenan react. You write Kenan into your sketch and it saves it, or it makes it better. But I think something that he really got into was that nostalgia in the Kenan and Kelly sketch. Also made better by the fact that Kiki was part of that, or was a little, she was a child star on similar shows who was directly inspired by Kenan and Kel, who was a bit younger than them and wanted to be like them, and then followed that dream and was like them, and then got to go full circle and do that sketch. So that's what I want to see from Kenan, is I don't, the Kenan reacts, I get it, it's I feel like I've seen it, not exaggerating, 500 times. So yeah, I want to see, Kenan and Kelly could be recurring. Kiki can, cameo, make that a thing. She could come back a couple times, and there's more to that story. And again, Devin in that sketch was the best Devin appearance I have seen. So it's like a win for everyone. It reunites Kenan and Kel. Kiki was the best host of the season. It brings Kiki back. It's just a win for everyone to lean into that.
So speaking of the Kenan and Kelly, I think I'm glad you brought it up again, just because it does seem like something that would happen as like a bookend of a career. Not that Kenan's acting career will end when he leaves SNL, that's for sure, unless he ends up running SNL, and that's what he does from now on. But that's something that maybe,
say running for president.
Yeah, well, vote for Kenan.
Enough with the celebrities who are doing that, and don't vote for Kenan. Vote for someone who has experience in that profession. Thank you.
That seems like a move that Kenan might make. Finally acknowledge that and bring Kel on the show. And even a smaller example, revealing coming out as Ving Rhames as the Arby's voice would just, I think kind of unbelievable. He's played Ving Rhames before, but never in that direct I'm Ving Rhames, the Arby's voice, and he walks on set. I thought that was really funny. So he had the home movie sketch last year. We gave him a lot of credit for that, as Kenan still has his fastball. This year he had the holiday train, the deer sketch, Charmin Bears, and the blocking it out for Christmas cold open, as well as the Herschel Walker impression. So that's kind of been Kenan's sample size so far through 9 episodes. So John, last take of the night. It's Kenan Thompson's 20th season. Prediction, do you think it's his last? And number 2, what else is there to say about Kenan?
I don't know if it's his last. I wouldn't be stunned if it was his last season, but you never know. I sort of don't want to speculate anymore about Kenan. I think he'll just go when he wants to. But I do think, for me, yes, definitely the moment of the season was the Kenan and Kelly pre-tape. And that was, something we're going to remember from Kenan's 20th season on the show. Everything else has been unusually unmemorable, I would say. But I think that's probably by design. Like, I think similar to the way we talked about Jost and Shay sort of stepping back from the head writers and being more, a regular part of the writing rotation to whatever, maybe it's just like handle less of a workload or just have an easily digestible role on the show. I think for Kenan, it's by design that he's like, hey, write me into your sketch if you want me to write me, but like, it's not going to be a Kenan vehicle at any point. And we're probably going to get maybe, a handful of Kenan vehicles in a given season at this point from Kenan. And otherwise, he's just going to be pure utility. And that will stack up the numbers enough to get him to the top of the power rankings most of the time.
Yeah, no surprises there. So we did it. So we went through. I know it was longer last season. It was more cast numbers, but
we had to rate them last time.
Yeah, we rated them and we did a really deep dive. So this is our we had to check in on them because we'll do this at the end, and we'll do that whole show again. But it was 4 hours and 30 something minutes last time, so we're exactly half what we did last year, going through cast member by cast member. So deep breath, everybody. Jon, Nicole, we did it. We talked about everybody, and I can't wait to see. We have 12 more shows.
Yep.
So way more data to go through, and I'm excited to see how the show will change without Cecily and see what our 4 rookies, how their back half of their season looks. So anything to talk about coming up on the show, Jon?
Yes. So next Monday night, we're going to do something that we did throughout the summer. In case you didn't join us throughout the summer of 2022, we did something called career retrospectives, which I think were really meaningful shows to produce. I really enjoyed them. And this time we're going to cover Cecily Strong's time on the show. We're going to go back and talk about her greatest sketches, greatest moments, really fun characters. We play some fun sound clips throughout her time on the show and really talk about what Cecily will be remembered for. So it's really our last sort of goodbye to Cecily Strong, and that will be next Monday night. And then, of course, we will be back the following week with full coverage of that Aubrey Plaza episode of SNL. I think we're going to have an SNL Stories that looks like it will be booked and probably air prior to that episode, but working on that and some other ones coming into January and February. But yeah, we got 3 episodes coming up. So, Aubrey Plaza, Michael B. Jordan, and then one other episode after that to be announced who the headliners are. If you are interested in podcasting with us for any of those episodes, we put out on Patreon today a form where you can register to join us on a patron feedback show throughout 2023 for the rest of the season. So all you have to do is register at patreon.com/the SNL Network. There is a Google form there, and then you sign up for a show, and we will book you for a patron feedback show. And then you get to talk to me about Saturday Night Live, answer some questions from our fan community. It's a really great perk of being a patron. So patreon.com/the SNL Network. And of course, we have plenty of things coming out on social media, including our data, which will go up there later this week, and some other fun charts pertaining to Aubrey Plaza coming up next week as well.
Nicole, what do you have to say to the listeners this week?
It's been a journey. It's been a journey. We made it through this episode. If you're still listening, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm so excited for the Aubrey Plaza episode. It's going to be great. And there's a lot of, data to talk about. She's connected to a lot of people at the show. Fans of hers know that she was an NBC page who famously went around and lied about the history of NBC and 30 Rock and just told funny random stories, which we love. So amazing that she's now hosting the biggest show at the place that she told lies about. I think that's iconic.
And she was an extra on SNL too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, she's very connected to
Target
the show.
lady.
And it's and it's crazy. It hasn't been, this hasn't happened. Another one for me with the host draft that we did over the summer. I'm winning that. So thank you, Aubrey, I am so excited for you. And one of my picks was the best host of the season, Kiki. So, maybe Aubrey will be up there too. Because my picks are awesome. And thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nicole, just to give you some, credit on the way out here, you get a lot of heat for your draft strategy. I know the drafting would be different if more was considered than appearances, but I did quickly crunched the numbers, and if we went by, much more sophisticated stats for these drafts, Nicole would be in second place with the Bowen and Shay team.
You're kidding.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, having someone get one of the update hosts is just unfair to begin with. So feel bad for you that you did get.
I did it to myself. I didn't think about how 2 rounds.
The fact that you did it to yourself kind of evens it out, but I do feel bad that someone had to get stuck with an update host for appearance.
I'm very comfortable with rejecting victimhood if I do it to myself. You don't have to feel bad.
You wear
for me.
it well. It's great, but I wanted to, you would be in second place behind Haynes if we went by.
Well, not for long.
That's
He's going to drop off.
So
Classic
for Nicole Rovine, Jon Schneider, I am Mike Murray. We are doing the SNL By The Numbers show after the Aubrey Plaza, Wednesday night, 8:30 live. Please join us and have a great week.